Happy Holy Week, everyone. For those who may not celebrate it, let me just quickly explain what Holy Week is. Holy Week is the week right before Easter, where you spend a whole week dwelling on from the time when Jesus first enters Jerusalem on the donkey to when he is eventually killed and buried. So preparing for Easter. I love this week. It's probably one of my favorite weeks of the year. It gives you an excuse to go to Mass every day. It's just, as someone who loves storytelling, it's an awesome week to just see it's almost like the conclusion to the Gospels. But what makes it even cooler is then Easter comes and it's not the conclusion, because death did not win, sin did not win, Jesus conquered over them. Awesome, but I'm not here to explain everything there is to explain about Holy Week. You can go to other videos where people talk about that. I'm here to talk about the first season of The Chosen. Hello, extremely intelligent lambs, and welcome back to the Movie Night Reviewer. I'll be your host today, Peter Ware. Today's topic will be on the first season of The Chosen. For those who may not know what The Chosen is a TV series started a couple years ago that tells the story of the Gospels, but it does it in a very interesting way. And this is why a lot of people like it. While there's plenty of movies talking about the Gospels, it's only this that actually takes time to think about each miracle, think about each person who's in these scenes, right? Where instead of saying, hey, and Jesus called Simon, it's, hey, this is the life that Simon was having before Jesus called him. And it makes it so it gives an extra depth to it. Including the characters like the blind man and stuff like that. Like, they give background stories to these characters so you understand who they are. They only just finished the third season. I don't know when they're going to shoot the fourth season. But one thing that makes it really interesting about The Chosen is that while most TV shows are completely funded by producers and people like that, what makes The Chosen so cool is that they actually have the ability, you, the people, can fund The Chosen. So if you guys like The Chosen, feel free to fund it. It's a great show. Let's get into the first season, talking about what I like about it, and sadly, what faults The Chosen has. So let's start out with what's good about it. I already kind of mentioned this before, but one thing that's really good about this is that you have background stories to each of the characters. As most of you guys know, based on some of you guys have been watching my channel for a little bit, and because of the reason that I said it in the beginning, my name is Peter. And so I have a real connection to Saint Peter because of him being my namesake. And because of that, I have a real connection to him. And some of that comes down to The Chosen, because before I was like, oh yeah, I like Peter, but almost everything in the Bible that's talking about him until we get to the Acts of the Apostles is all dealing with and he said this thing and Jesus was like, get behind me, Satan. He denied Jesus 3 times. He did all this oh, look at all this bad stuff he does. And he kind of was like, oh man, he's a cool guy and he's the first pope. But I'm like, oof, you mean that's a hard name to be named after. But after seeing The Chosen, it really gave light to the character of Peter. And I'm not saying that that's actually what Peter was like in real life, because that's the big thing. That's one big thing we're going to talk about later about what's wrong with The Chosen. But the fact of the matter is, I remember when I watched the first season, I was so struck by how much he's like me. How the way they portray Simon Peter in this series, you really feel like, oh my goodness, this is like they're representing what I am like. And I really like that, because I would probably have done the same things that Peter does. It's really awesome to see a character like that. There's other good characters. Even Jesus. I like Jesus. I will talk about some problems I have with Jesus later on in this video, because they're awesome problems. There's a lot of good things about Jesus in this series. Besides that, Andrew's pretty good. There's a lot of good characters in this series, and you really get to know each of the apostles, and I love that. I love it how you get to know each of the apostles. We don't meet all the apostles in the first season, but we meet a number of them, and you really get to know them. And it's not like you meet them and then a couple minutes later, Jesus comes in and boom, there we go. They have been recruited into his team. It's more of the first episode you have some stuff with Simon, Peter, and Andrew, and then you meet Matthew. Besides that, you mainly don't meet any of the other apostles. The main storyline in the first episode is all dealing with Mary Magdalene and like the demons were cast out of her and all that good stuff. And it's really cool. Mary Magdalene is not one of my favorite characters, but I'll get into that later. Well, what's really cool about that is that it's not until the last minutes of the episode that you actually meet Jesus. And you never even hear him say that he's Jesus or anything. It's just he appears, he casts out the demons, and then he goes off. In the next episode, you continue and you see him again in the last part of the episode, and you meet a couple of his other followers, Thaddeus and Little James. I would have to admit that they are not the most fleshed out of the characters. Little James get a little bit more, but Thaddeus does not really get anything later on. He's just a part of the group, and I think that's another thing they kind of did. I'll talk about what they did wrong later. But anyways, the point is, so then you only see Jesus until the end. The next episode, episode 3, is where you spend the whole time with Jesus, and this is the first episode I've watched of The Chosen, because I was watching with my family the first season, and my parents felt like the first episode, dealing with the whole demon things and all, was too frightening for the little kids. So we started with episode 3, which is Let the Children Come to Me. Very nice, sweet episode. It was a great episode to start with, and I'm like, so when I watched it, I was like, oh, okay. So this was just one episode that was funny, and all the rest of the episodes are going to be bland. I don't like most Christian movies because a lot of times they're preachy. A lot of times they get preachy and kind of low quality. I will talk about that later because there are problems with this being less preachy, somewhat preachy, but a little more about the low quality stuff. Anyways, so I was like, okay, so this is actually a good episode. And then I watched the rest of the season, and I was just like, actually, I like this. And it was like one of those things where I went into it telling my parents that I wasn't going to like The Chosen because there was no way I was going to like this. It was going to be low quality. It was going to do nothing for me. And it was actually not saying that it renewed my love for Jesus or anything, but it did spark something new in me to remind me that Jesus was a human and that Jesus does understand, and there's humanity in there. And while I didn't know that, it was something that was nice to reawaken the whole, yes, he could crack jokes. And one of my favorite things is my family, growing up, we had a picture of Jesus in I believe it was on a stairwell or something like that, but it was him laughing. And I always thought that was the best because it was like, yeah, Jesus is funny. He can be funny. He can laugh. He can act like the rest of us. I really like that picture. Anyways, so that's some things good with it. They have other episodes. Episode 4 is probably my favorite episode of that season because the first 2 episodes are leading up with what's going on with Simon's life, Simon Peter, and you really get to understand, oh, okay, so he's making a deal with the Romans to try to pay off his debt, stuff like that, and then he betrays the Romans, and he's going to be thrown in jail if he doesn't catch enough fish. So he spent the whole night out there catching fish, and he still doesn't catch anything. And then he comes in and meets Jesus, and then Jesus says, cast out your net one last time. And we all know what happens. He catches so much fish that he has to fill 2 boats, and it pays off his debt and extra. And then Jesus says, follow me. And I just love that moment because one thing I never got a thought to was the follow me part with Jesus, is because while some of these people may not have known when they were asked to follow him, they probably just thought him as a prophet or something like that. But the fact of the matter is some of them knew that he was the Messiah. So hearing the Messiah say, follow me, is something really big, especially for like Simon, because it makes sense now why he was saying, depart from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man, because, yeah, he was betraying his own kind to the Romans. He was doing all this bad stuff. Now, is that really what happened with Peter? Probably not. Is it the best choice to have him do that? Probably not. But the point is, it works for the series. There's some great moments building up. And the first season ends with Jesus meeting the Samaritan at the well. And they're just they've been invited into the city and the series ends there. It's really cool ending. I like it. It like really sets up, and I was like, I can't wait for the second season. And we will talk about the second season later on this week, hopefully. But now let's get into the problems of this. Let's get the first one off the bat. One of the problems that people can run into with The Chosen is that they do a good enough job with setting up these characters and all kind of stuff that sometimes, and you can even see this, that I kept pulling myself the major not to do this, is that some people started having the problem that they started saying, this is what happened. This is what happened in The Chosen. And I know I keep having mentioned to my siblings, like, hey, this is not actually what happened in the Gospels. Just keep that in mind so that you don't fall into that trap. What matters, you have to remember that this is just like when you're watching historical fiction. You have to remember that this is actually fiction and not real. This is not really what happened in the Bible. No proof that Simon Peter made a deal with the Romans to pay off his debt on his boat. We have no proof that this is what happened. But we can say, and they do actually mention in the beginning of the first episode, just write it down, this is based off of the real events of the Bible, but the backgrounds behind these characters are made up. Now that we got that over with, let's talk about visually what I think of this. This is the problem that I have had for the longest time. The Chosen, from the very first season, is too dark. They have some they have some scenes in the light and all when it's outside, but they love to go into to dark caverns and stuff like that and shoot in the dark. They really like darkness for some reason. Almost every other scene is in the dark. And yes, a lot of times I watch it on my phone or something. Sometimes I watch it on my laptop, but a lot of times when I'm watching The Chosen, it's something like I'm on the move or something like that, and I'm just doing the dishes or something, and then have my phone on watching the episode or something like that. And the fact of the matter is, on my phone, the brightness doesn't go up, and even probably none of you guys have seen this, but on my personal channel, which I haven't shared with you guys, I don't post anything on it. It was just something that originally, when I created an email back when I was 12 years old, I came up with a channel for it, and a couple weeks ago I decided to put 2 random videos. A video of just a black screen, and then a video that is the wedding feast of Cana from The Chosen to the chicken dance. Hilarious. I had so much fun doing it. It only took a couple minutes to do, so I quickly threw it together. I can leave a link to that video if you guys really want to see it. It's kind of funny. Anyways, the point is that when I was creating that video, one of the first things I had to do was I had to go into my lighting settings in the program I use, DaVinci Resolve, and I had to turn up the brightness a lot so you can even see what's going on, because every scene is so dark in this series. And I wanted to be able to see what the characters are doing, and the fact of the matter is, the video I got was a little bit darker than normal probably, but the fact of the matter is, that whole scene is just really, really dark. They just shoot stuff in the dark. They don't have any light. And the fact of the matter is, yes, shooting stuff in the dark can be enjoyable, and I like the Batman, and that has a lot of scenes in the dark. But the fact of the matter is, you don't always have to shoot everything in the dark. You can have some stuff in the light. And yes, they do have some scenes. It's just, the fact of the matter is, even with night scenes, turn up the brightness a little bit so people can actually see what's going on, because if you can't see what's going on, that's a problem. The next problem I'm going to mention is that of the music and sound effects. I'm going to start with the sound effects, right? The sound effects sometimes are way too loud. There's a moment, and this is something I didn't recognize the first time I was watching it, but there's this moment where one guy's stirring stuff and he's slurp, slurp, slurp. It's why do you need that loud? Turn down the volume on the sound effects, because the sound effects, and I know it's not naturally, that's not, maybe they made a natural thing to make that sound like that, but the fact of the matter is, sound effects, if it's way too loud, it's distracting, is a problem, and I noticed that when I was rewatching the first episode. I was going to try to watch the whole first season before making this review, but the fact of the matter is, I ran out of time and I needed to review out. And I've seen it before, so I already know. But I watched the first episode again, and I already remember. Technically, I've watched the full series 3 times over, so this is the 4th time around. And I really noticed this time because I was like, now that I have this channel and I'm allowing myself to think more critically of this stuff, I noticed stuff that I didn't notice before because I was too caught up. And this is something I'm going to mention in the second season, but I got really too caught up in how great it was that I forgot how cringy it is. I did notice in the very beginning, for the first time I watched it, that it does have some cheesy moments in it, and some more Christian production value moments in it. But I was too caught up in how great they did that I forgot, but I put aside. And this is really hard, and this just proves that it did a good job with some of its writing, that someone like me, who from the very young age, even as like 5 years old, I was already criticizing and thinking about how you could fix a movie. But from like a very young age, I was like thinking about movies like Thomas the Tank Engine and all, and like, well, if you did this differently, it might be a little better. As a little kid, I was already doing that. So it just shows how good the writing is that I was able to put that aside and just watch the series and be like, good job, and didn't pay attention to how bad of quality sometimes it is. Next is the music. The music, this from the very beginning, I never liked the music in The Chosen. I think there's a couple times that the music was good, but most of the time, the music is terrible. It comes down to especially when it comes down to the show don't tell thing. It's kind of, I've been thinking about this all summer, and I'm so glad I'm able to talk about it now. One of the problems I have with the music in The Chosen is this, that it's kind of like a sitcom, in the way that you have the laugh track, but in this one it's like the emotional music. So like, I talked about in my video about Bahali, the conclusion, how having emotional music, I even made a short taking a clip from that video and making a short out of it, so you might have seen the short. You can always watch the whole Bahali conclusion episode, or you can just click on that short and watch that short all the way through. See what I'm talking about? But basically what I'm saying is, the problem is, you have to make your movie, the music can't be cheesy and it can't be overly drawn out. The problem is the music in this is always way too cheesy. It's just like laugh tracks. That what happens with laugh tracks, and why I don't like laugh tracks, is that yeah, in some old things like the Andy Griffith Show, it works. But a lot of times with laugh tracks and everything, is that it gives this feeling that you have to laugh. Laugh at this. It must be laughed at. And the fact of the matter is, you don't need to laugh at everything. Just in the same way, it's The Chosen with his emotional music starting. It's too on the nose emotional music that it gives me this feeling like it's telling me you have to feel emotion about this. And I'm like, but I don't. And it just, when a laugh track works is when it's actually a funny thing. And you're like, it's kind of telling you to laugh, but you also laughing yourself, so it's just they're laughing with you. But if you have the most unfunny things is kind of funny, having a laugh track to, it doesn't work, because then it's telling you, you have to think this is funny, and then it makes it cringy because how not funny it is, that they still think it's funny. It's one of those things where, just like in those movies where it's so bad it's good, how what makes it funny is that sometimes on purpose they make it bad, and sometimes it's just that it's bad, and that's what makes it funny, is that they tried to make a good thing and they made it so cringily bad that it's funny. The problem is, with laugh tracks, you make something that's cringy, and maybe you would make a chuckle out of it, but the moment they say, hey, this is really funny, and it doesn't seem funny anymore, because now you feel like they did that on purpose, and then it takes the fun out of like, oh, so it wasn't actually funny because they were trying on purpose to make that funny. It was like, oh, that's kind of so cringy, it's funny. Now it's not funny anymore because now I know that you did that on purpose and you just made it cringy. And it's just cringy now. That's the problem. When you on purpose say, hey, this is supposed to be funny, and it's not funny, then it's going to draw your audience out. It's going to cause your audience to like lose the moment, because what makes movies so funny is when they give a pause. As I talked about before in one of my videos, some of you guys might be confused why I put out 5 videos of 2 penguins and a polar bear talking. I can explain later all about that, but one of the videos I put out about that was talking about the movie The Penguins of Madagascar, and how I watched it with my brothers recently, and I thought it was the funniest thing ever, because it gave the moment a pause. You have moments in that movie where you just have this joke, and I need to like analyze that movie. Like I need to watch it and like analyze it, like really like pause it every couple of seconds, analyze what makes it so funny. Because in my mind, I think every joke hit, but I think the reason why they did that is because they knew that they were being funny, but they didn't add a laugh track or anything to tell you that it had to be funny. So anyways, I don't want to go on a rant about this too long, but the point is that when you put emotional music in that's too on the nose emotional, and it's just like, especially when it's like he does a miracle and he's like, oh, just like, cool, I was not feeling that, and now you just made it cringy. Anyways guys, so the next problem I have is the writing. I talked about how I like the writing, but at some point I actually don't like the writing because it kind of gets cringy. It kind of becomes a little bit too on the nose. Moments of show don't tell, moments where it's like, for example, right, in the first episode they have this one moment where they kind of set up that this guy has been like caught in Matthew around through these like certain streets that he doesn't want to be seen in because he's going to be mocked and all that kind of stuff in. But then at the end of the scene, they kind of says something that seems like it's just like, yeah, but that guy would have mentioned that before then. It's like, he's just like, oh yeah, you have to get out here. It's like, but like, can't you drive me all the way away? It's like, no, I don't want to ruin my reputation completely. I can't be seen with you. So it's like, okay, cool. So it's set up that like, I mean, that these people hate these tax collectors. But the problem is that if this guy's been driving him around for a while now, or does Matthew get someone else to drive him every day or something? It's like, this guy is acting like this the first time he ever brought it up, and he would have brought it up a lot more than that. So unless Matthew has a really bad memory, which we know Matthew doesn't, Matthew would have heard him say that before. And why would he be arguing with him that day? Unless it was something that they planned before, but this is the first time they ever did it. And then the next day, it seems like Matthew went walking through the streets by himself. So it's like the whole moment was like, it was supposed to be like, oh yeah, look how full of himself Matthew is and all. But then in the next moment, it's just like, so, but why did you have that if that was pointless? So there's a lot of moments where it's just like, you can see that the writers know some stuff about movies, but they're still at the beginning stages. And the best thing I wrote down in my notes, the best thing I can think of is, as I was talking about with Baha and all that kind of stuff, it has the Tollywood cringy writing sometimes. Something I forgot to mention in my Baha conclusion, and this also was in the first Baha movie, is that they have some moments where it's just like someone says something, and then everyone's like, oh, just like overly reacting to something. It's just like, that guy just said something very simple. Why are you overreacting to that? And the fact of the matter is, with something like overreacting, that is what goes with stage acting. Like, you have to be overly dramatic because you have a whole audience that has to see you from a distance. While with movie acting, you can have someone close straight into your face. It can get really, really close into your face. But the fact of the matter is, so you don't need to do as much dramatic acting because you can be more acting in your face and less of acting in your emotions. So, anyways, but the point is that that The Chosen sometimes falls into the Tollywood problem of that it's still a baby movie industry. And the fact of the matter is, The Chosen, I don't think it's classified under Hollywood. And so, yeah, it doesn't have the Hollywood experience. It's kind of one of those things where, yeah, good job for what it sounds like is that literally The Chosen was started because the writer of The Chosen and director, Dallas Jenkins, put on a production for his church, and it got out to more people, and people said, I really like this, I want to see more of this. And so he made The Chosen off of it. But the problem is that he is still a baby in the movie industry, and so the cinematography, the music, and the writing can be good sometimes, but it also can be very cringy and very low budget Christian movie writing. Anyways, guys, so tell me your thoughts below. Do you guys like The Chosen? Have you guys watched The Chosen? If you haven't watched The Chosen yet, especially if you're a Christian, watch The Chosen. It's good. It has good points. You just have to remember that it is not reality. It is fiction based off of stuff that happened in reality, but it is not reality. Thank you guys for watching. This has been the Movie Night Reviewer. Peter Wary, signing off.